the one that we missed, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, which is the one that we're in right now, which is from September the 20th to September the 27th. How many of you, when you leave this class, I know that you guys have to work, have families, but how many of you take this information and go over it when you get home and try to read over it and find something on it when you go home besides when you come to class? How many people, just let me see your hand if you look over it and read it when you go home? All right, tonight we're going to talk about the Feast of Tabernacles. And we're going to, I did this out of obedience. This was something that Bishop Wayne asked me to do. And I did it out of obedience. But now I see why he wanted me to do it. Because just what he said, it made a lot of sense. The Feast of Tabernacles tonight, we're going to come from a couple of scriptures. First scripture we're going to come from is Leviticus 23. I don't know what y'all, but is it just me? Is it hot in here? It's hot in here? You know, Bishop said he don't want his side. He don't want his side on, so. Yeah, but I mean, if you ain't gonna do it, you ain't do it. I got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, but I thought you were gonna go over what you could answer.
No, Holmes, I gave it to you to see what you've learned. Yeah, I heard what Holmes said. She might go hold the paper to mine. She was holding the paper, thought I was gonna go over and you fill the answers in. Lord Jesus, keep me middle cross. Leviticus 23, 35, we have to say amen.
Amen.
Says, on the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no service-side work therein. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. On the 8th day shall be a holy convocation unto you, and you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. It is a solemn assembly, and you shall do no servile work therein. These are the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, a burnt offering and a meat offering, a sacrifice and a drink offering, and everything upon his day. Beside the Sabbath, Lord, and beside your gifts, and beside all your vows, and beside all your free will offerings, which you give unto the Lord, also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the first should be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day should be a Sabbath. I'm gonna stop right there for a minute because I see you parents looking. This is right here, 39 is what we're in. It's the Feast of Tabernacles. So they're saying on the first day should be a Sabbath, meeting. On the first day that we started this feast, Feast of Tabernacles, on the first day, traditionally, they take off from work and don't work on the first day. And then on the last day, which is the 8th day, they take off from work and don't work on Lastly, that's a part of the Feast of Tabernacles. That's what it is. And you shall take you on the first day the boughs of goodly tree, branches and palm trees, and boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. The Feast of Tabernacles is like our Thanksgiving. The Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days, we are to be giving thanks unto the Lord. And what these trees are, for those of y'all who looking puzzled about what was the tree, it actually was like we get flowers and bouquets. There were certain flowers that they put together, and they would wave the flowers as a wave offering, doing their rejoicing and singing and praising God in those 7 days. And it says, and ye shall keep it a feast unto the Lord 7 days in the year. It should be a statute forever in your generations, and you shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You should dwell in booths 7 days, and what they did here is what we don't do. Some of the Jews are still doing it. Is that they would take wood and they would build a. Some people would dwell in tents. Some people would build a wooden house for the 7 days, maybe in their backyard. Some of the Jews gather together and they go to one place and they camp out. And they build these booths. That's what Sukkot means. It means booths. They build them, and they usually build them with wood and make sides, and then they put a top on it, which is not a wooden top, but a top that's open so they can see. So they would use branches to make the top, and they would do this for 7 days. That's why it's called a Feast of Booths, or it's called a Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. And Sukkot means shelter. It means a building. That's what it's called, tabernacle, a building. And the Israelites, all the Israelites born should dwell in booths. That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles is the last in the fall feast. And from what I'm seeing and what I'm reading is that even though I'm asking you guys, do you have questions? Nobody's have questions, but nobody really understands it either. And how I know nobody really understands it is because the questions that I asked and the answers that I read. So nobody really understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. He didn't just say to do this to just in remembrance. I put in there remembering because I wanted to see first your remembering of what you remembered about the feast and what we've been taught. And most of you, and not even most of you, some of you remembered all of them, but most of you didn't remember the reason why. So that means whatever I taught didn't get taught well because nobody understands the totality and the reason why. Even though we said it in class several times. The whole reason that God even came up with these holidays was that he came up with them so that the children of Israel remember how he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Nobody put that down for the answer. You're supposed to remember what Christ did. Nobody put that down for the answer. This was all in remembrance of what he did for them when Pharaoh held them captive and that they were in captivity and then he brought them out. The whole purpose of the feast is to remember what God did. And we have to remember that he didn't just come up with these feasts just so we can have days of eating, but they were to be days that would be dedicated unto him. And I just read it to you in Leviticus 23. So some of you might want to highlight that and go back over it. That these days are, during this time, you offer up. We know that we're not doing burnt offerings anymore. We're not doing meat offerings, sacrifice offerings. We are doing the drink offerings because we do communion. So we do the bread and the drink. But he says, besides the Sabbath of the Lord and besides your gifts, so every one of these days that came, there was always a gift brought in or a free will offering. to give unto the Lord. Nobody ever came empty-handed. But the whole point was to remember what God had done for them. And not only to remember what God had done for them, because if you can remember what was done for you, then when you, even though we're in a different time, when the same thing happens to us, we can remember what God can do for us. So the same way God brought them out is the same way, like right now we're going through, right now this pandemic, and we're going through losing our loved ones, and those of us who have lost our loved ones to this COVID-19. That's a big pandemic, and it's a pandemic just like it was back in the days of old. In the same way God brought the children of Israel out, that's the same way we have to have the faith to believe that God is going to bring us out, even though most people are seeing it as hopeless, and we're still losing people. Now the numbers are dying down, as they say. Is that true? That it's starting to dissipate again, or starting to, come down. But some of us have lost people that we love that are dear, and we didn't just necessarily lose them to COVID. Some of us just lost people that we love during this time. So what this was, and that's why I put remember in there, is that you want to remember what each and every feast was, and what was the purpose of the feast, and why we do the feast, and what they can do for us now, and what they're supposed to do for us until Jesus comes. So therefore, in reading this, and reading your answers and what you wrote, apparently, I got to come up with another, I got to come up with something more creative to help you guys to remember, because apparently what we've been going over and what we said has not stuck. Maybe you guys might be like me, might need to be repetition, you might need to hear it over and over again so that we can all get it. But what has happened is that we have not been mindful of these days, and neither have we kept these days, because most of us was not even aware that they exist, or most of us thought that it was just for the Jews, even though we've read that they're not just for the Jews, they're for all of us. And even Pam and I were talking about these 7 days and what we would do. What I found out in these 7 days, they fasted the first day of the fast, and they fasted the last day of the fast. But really, the Feast of Tabernacles was like Thanksgiving, in which, you did text me some good information, and it's basically the same foods that, remember that Daniel, and they were Jews, so remember that the foods that they were eating were the foods that the Jewish was allowed to eat. So you're still able to eat, but it just wasn't only just the beans and the brown rice and couscous as we saw, but you're able to eat during the Feast of Tabernacles. They like to do stuffed food, so there were meat inside the stuffed peppers, zucchini they had that you can eat. But you eat fresh fruits and vegetables just like you do, and you're able to eat, and that's what they did. But it was Thanksgiving. It was like a lot of food that they did during this time, because during these 7 days, everything that we went through from the beginning to now, this was the Thanksgiving. So when we went over the Passover, when we went over the unleavened bread, and we went over the first fruits and Pentecost, when we went over that stuff, we went over that because all of that was leading to this. It was leading to the Thanksgiving, because all of it represented something that God did. Remember, we talked about the Passover and what it meant to them, and the Passover and what it means to us as Christ being our Passover, Him being our atonement. So let's go to, and I'm gonna do something different so that you guys can remember. Let's go to Exodus 23 and 16. When you have it, say amen.
Amen. Amen.
It says, in the feast of harvest, the first fruits of our labors, which I have sown in the field, in the feast of ingathering, which is in the end of the year. Because remember, the Feast of Tabernacles, this is now considered Remember, when we come in, even though it's in the Jewish calendar, their year just started in September. But this is the end of the feast for the fall. So, which is in the end of the year, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field. So this is pertaining to the Feast of Tabernacles. So in each and every one of these feasts that we went over, we read in Leviticus that there were numerous of things that the people did when they came. And that was, they gave the fruit of their labor. We read that they gave the fruit of their free will offering. They gave gifts, and they kept the Sabbath. So a lot of times, most of us don't have a Sabbath day. Most of us will work 7 days a week. We don't even take a Sabbath. But there is time that you have to take out and set aside for God. So what happened is that now that we are aware of these days and times and what is going on, now we can kind of adjust our schedules and ourselves to when the following year comes. We'll know when the Pentecost comes. We'll know when the Passover is there. We'll know when the unleavened bread and first fruits, and we'll know what to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create I think I might do a packet for you guys. Nothing big, nothing outrageous, but maybe something small, but that you guys can kind of study and remember, because so that you can remember what we do these for and why we do them. I've been thinking since I read over some of your answers, like what I could do different. So even though I'm here talking to you guys, I'm in my head thinking like, what can be done better to, and a lot of times I know some of you weren't to all the classes, so because you weren't here, you don't have the information, so you're not really aware of what was said. And like Bishop said, even though we do have it on YouTube, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, if we don't come to class, most of us not going to go back over it. If we do go over it, we're not going to get the full benefit of what was given and what was said during the classes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together something small, not big, and I won't do a lot of them. It's something small with key, with each and every one of these, and I'll put it as in so that we'll know why they were. Can anybody tell me from the classes that you were in, if you remember anything from the Passover? Anybody? Nobody remember? Nothing from the last 2 classes ago. Go ahead, Dee.
That it was that was the time where they would use the lambs without a spot or a blemish to cover the doorpost, so that the death angel, when it went to the land of Egypt, would bypass them, and everyone that didn't have it, the death angel would take their firstborn. And then we discussed that Jesus came down and he became that unblemished lamb, which was the ultimate sacrifice for us, so that we will be able to be reconciled back into God.
Yes, Dee. Perfect. And I remember even before I went over the information, I asked you, and you was the first person that knew, and you said it, but you added more to it. Anybody remember? Good, excellent deals, because that is exactly what it was, or what it represents. Anybody remember the Feast of the Unleavened Bread? Go ahead, Dee.
They used the unleavened. They wanted to use the unleavened bread because the leaven represented like malice and strife. So this was a feast of giving the offering of having a feast for God without the malice and strife, as a form of, let's say, purging or cleansing from the things that you had built up from you for the year before in your heart. So this was you getting an atonement, and the unleavened bread represented the bread that was pure, without the malice, without the strife, without the anger and bitterness.
Okay, this is the question I got. Do anybody feel like this class has not benefited them at all? And I mean, was this class even useful See anybody? Because the reason why I'm asking because it don't, Bishop asked the question. He's quite right. And this is why Bishop don't want to teach anymore. But I told Bishop it doesn't matter because our job is to get the information out to the people, and it's up to the people to receive it. But most of us have trades, and most of us have been in the college or been to school for something. And even if we haven't been to college or we've been in training, meaning we have trades, you have classes and you have things that you have to learn in order for you to be productive on your jobs and to do what you've been trained to do. And this is the same thing. I got to tell you all, I am so hurt. I'm so hurt and disappointed in you all because the thing is, if I'm teaching something that you all do not know, and I ask you, do you have questions? Then that's the time to ask questions. But I can't say, do you have questions and nobody have questions, but then I ask questions and nobody answer questions. Because then it makes the teaching, why am I teaching if nobody's, if you're not learning anything, and if it's not sticking or it don't mean anything? And if you don't have any questions, then that means you know. So if you know, why are you not answering the questions? Because the work that we do for God is just as important as the work that we do for Caesar. Everything that we do for God, and I gotta say this because I love you guys. I love God and I love God people. And trust me, it is not an easy task for apostles to be apostles, bishops to be bishops, evangelists to be evangelists, prophets to be prophets, prophetess. It's not an easy job. Our jobs for God is way more important than our jobs for Caesar. And the importance of this is in Christ, and we've read it over and over again in many scriptures, and we just read it again tonight, where Christ said that this is to be remembered from generation to generation. But even if we didn't know it in the past, and we're learning now, it's time to grasp it and get a hold of it so that you can teach it to your children and your children's children, and you can teach it to other people that come in your path. This is not just something that we're doing just to say you came to class. This is important to the life of the believer. And it's important about what happened back then. It's important with what's happening right now in the world. And it's important with Christ coming back. This is important because all of this is leading up to Christ coming back. And so far, the only person that answered questions is Deacon Lowe. See, the only person that's answering every question about each and every one of these, when I'm sure most of us was here for the classes. And this is just to bring remembrance of what has been taught. Anybody for the first fruits? Anybody remember anything on the first fruits? Go ahead, Deacon Lowe.
If I'm not mistaken, the first fruits was, and how we put it was, it wasn't like a tithe, but it was the first fruits of what came in for your harvest. So it was whatever your increase was for that year, you will offer that up to God.
Anybody remember anything about Pentecost? Go ahead, Pam. And y'all do have notes, so I'm pretty sure most of y'all sit down should have notes for this stuff. Go. Anybody remember why they do Pentecost? What was the reason? Pam just gave us pretty much what it was, Mama. You said something? You said something in stock? Nobody remember? Go ahead, Deacon Lowe.
It was because there was a time where they were actually, when the Holy Ghost was come. They was actually on one accord up in the room, and they were told to go in there until the strength came, so that they can go out and be able to confess what they actually learned. And they needed that type of strength in order to be able to give the gospel, because of the persecution and stuff that they were going to actually come up against. So he didn't want them to go out without that strength, because they wouldn't be able to withstand the persecution that will come, and they will possibly fail.
You went a little deep on me, deep. Which one the ball ball? All right, you want to say something? Let's see, you got your hand. Go ahead. The next thing, anybody remember Feast of Atonement? Okay. So we right in Bishop neck of the woods. We just hit his neck of the woods. So before we give it to Bishop, anybody remember? Anyway, what is the Feast of Atonement? Anybody know that? I'm not gonna go in. Anybody know what that is? Okay. Tonight, maybe you might get across.
Good evening. I was sitting there. One of the things I wanted to open up that I thought was very important for us and those that are viewing is the atonement, the Feast of Atonement. And I wanted to open it up with Romans, the 5th chapter, the 20th verse. Talk about atonement, so that we can understand the significance and the importance of it. I'm quite sure y'all went to the heart of the subject of Yom Kippur and going into the Feast of Tabernacles. The whole heart of it was, the first thing was the confession of sin. Amen. Building a bridge to actually unite a relationship back to God.